This episode of Film Jobs is made possible by the generous support of our patrons at patreon.com. Hello, John Hess from Filmmaker IQ. In the Film Jobs series, I wanted to present to you profiles of different positions in the Hollywood filmmaking industry. Now, so much attention gets poured on actors and directors, but there's a long list of other people and jobs that actually make films and television shows happen. Well, today I'm talking to my friend Wes Irwin. Wes works as a post-production executive for Fox 21 television studios and found us years ago and has since invited me to lunch on the Fox lot many times. Now, executives might get a bad rap in popular press, but I think, as you'll see, executives have a very important and significant role in creating the television shows that we all love. But don't take my word for it. Let's jump right into that interview. So, Wes, what is your title at Fox?
I'm at Fox 21, Fox 21 Television Studios. So my title is Executive Director of Post-Production. And we work in association with the production executives. And we do the streaming, premium cable, and cable shows for Fox.
Okay.
And then there's 20th Century Fox Television, where we're arm's length from them. And they do the network shows. So that's the difference between 20th Century Fox Television and us.
Let's talk about the word executive, because that's something that's so easy to get confused about, because everybody kind of thinks that if you're not creative, you're just an executive. Can you kind of describe for me what an executive does?
Interestingly enough, we were all the executives that I work with, for the most part, were producers or actually physically on shows at some time in our career. And we've eventually moved over to the executive level for one reason or another. Maybe our creative executives moved over because they were prolific producers, and now the studio saw value in them, bringing in projects in their relationships with writers, etc., to make them valuable to be in the creative team for the studio. For the production folk, they were either accountants and or line producers that were very successful at doing what they do, and were also asked to become executives from the studio level to essentially protect the studio's money and the workflow, vet the workflow of all the productions that we are currently doing.
So can you kind of maybe distinguish the difference between a producer and an executive? Like, what is the difference?
The studio executive gets paid by the studio, so we're the ones in charge of the money, or we're responsible for making sure the money is spent in a responsible way. We will hire the producer to bring in a show on budget and on time, and basically be the eyes and ears of that particular show on a daily basis. Now, keep in mind, we might have 14 shows going on at one time. So I can't, as a post-production executive, I cannot watch all the dailies for that one show, especially as much footage is being shot nowadays. And we rely on that producer, my post-producer, for example, to watch the dailies, to be my eyes and ears on that particular production. And if they have any issues or problems, they call me, and at that point, I prioritize, my day to help whatever show needs my help at that time.
I think you were talking about, you started making distinction between post executives. Can you kind of describe the different kinds of executives that work in a like Fox 21?
Yeah, for Fox 21, we have the creative team, and so they're the ones who have the relationships with the writers and the hierarchy of the studio. The top management of the studio. And then we have the production executives, which I work under. We have the legal team, and we have the accounting team.
So how's a project, a new show, how does it become a reality? How does it go through the greenlit process?
From my perspective, I'm just handed a script. And then it's a script that the studio is interested in making, and if we could make it at a particular number, then in all likelihood we'll make the show, or we'll make the pilot.
So at this point now, the script, somebody in the studio likes the script.
Yeah, typically the creative exec and some of the heads of the studio.
Okay.
Yes.
So they're saying, okay, Wes, can we make this show
Right.
for this price? And that's what you're.
Yeah, and so our production people, my head of production, will assign a production executive and myself to break the script down, and I'll look at all the post-production elements of that script, as the production manager or the production executive will look at areas of location and all the things that they look at, and actors and all that, and we will come up with a number as to how much we feel that this particular pilot and series pattern that will run. And we'll submit that number to our accountants. Our accountants will package all that up, submit it back to creative, and creative will send it back to the studio to say, hey, this is what it could be. Then they go out and they've already typically have shopped that show to a network, whether it be a premium cable or streamer, and there'll be interest there, and if the network likes that number, then they'll greenlight it.
Okay.
And then from that point on, then it's all about the casting of it. A lot of times people will be attached.
Now, at that point, what's your relationship to the project at that point, once it's greenlit?
Okay, then once the show is greenlit, my responsibility then is to hire the post producer, the whole post team, to make deals with the editors, their assistant editors, the composer, music supervisor, music editor, visual effects house, post-production facilities, editing facilities, and make sure that from the post-production workflow, we're all buttoned up. Now, a lot of people assume post-production is the back end of production. Well, we're involved in all three stages of production. We're involved in pre-production, production, and post. So we're reading the script at the same time production's reading the script, because there are elements of that script that are going to be needed in production and in pre-production. For example, if you have a song that's scripted, we're going to need to know how much that song's going to be to license. We're going to need to know what those visual effects are going to cost for an episodic series. And all that information needs to be figured out prior to shooting. And then prior to shooting, we also have to do camera tests, workflow tests. In the day when we were shooting film, you would have, this is the negative that we're going to shoot, then this is the process that we're going to use, and then as we graduated into tape, what kind of cameras are we going to shoot? What kind of tape are we going to shoot? Used. And nowadays on digital files, it's the same thing. What kind of camera we're going to use, and you have to test everything. Is it going to be the Red camera? Is it going to be the Arri Alexa? Why are we going to use the Alexa as opposed to capturing these huge, Red files? And or reverse of that. There's all these decisions that need to be made and tested prior to actual shooting, because the day of shoot, you better have gone through all these tests to make sure your workflow is 100% vetted by the time you get to the back end, because a lot of times you don't have the luxury of figuring out in post when you have an air date.
So do you also cover like archive? Is that part of when you do your process of planning?
Indeed we do. Just for the nature of my career, and starting in film in days of preserving negative and then old negative cut, etc. Now we're archiving that in LTO tape. And that in itself, to me, is a scary process, because it doesn't have the confirmed shelf life as film does.
Right, yeah.
But that's going to be somebody else's job to figure out after I'm long gone, because I think it has at least a 15-year shelf life, and then they have to migrate it over to the next hardware and reader of these LTO tapes.
What does a day in your career look like?
Okay, it's very fast-paced. I mean, you hit the ground running. As soon as you wake up, you're checking your emails. And for the most part, a typical day, let's say you're starting a show. You're starting to look at scripts. You'll look at a script, you'll break that script down, you'll budget that script, and you'll do a schedule for that script. Okay, that's part of your day, while you have other shows continually working. You're getting dailies in on Homeland, on Versace or Pose or one of those shows, the Americans. And we have shows going on all over the world, so you're constantly refreshing your mail to make sure that you're on top of anything that could be going wrong. And then at the same time, you have to keep the train moving on shows that are getting ready to be greenlit, shows that are greenlit, ready to start crewing up and producing, and then the shows that are actively delivering to network and air. You have to manage that throughout your whole day and prioritize what you really need to spend the majority of your time on. And sometimes you don't know every day you don't know what's going to happen, and sometimes you'll get a call from an executive that require 100% of your day to be spent on this particular project. And other times you have the ability to pick and choose what you feel is important. But it's all juggling a number of balls and knowing what ball to continually keep in the air. If there's one that's going to be dropped, hopefully it's the lowest priority ball that's dropped. And we're all human. Everybody makes mistakes, from your crew to myself, to our bosses. And my bosses make very little mistakes. So
Let's get that clear.
It's a trickle down theory, right? So it's bigger as you go down. But also the people who are in the line of fire, for the most part, the guys who work on the set, they're the ones who probably get challenged the most, because they see what's going on. I mean, there's your actor calls in sick. What do you do then? And then you have to scramble. Or if it rains and you're expecting a sunny day, what do you do then? And for our editorial purposes, it's like, hey, we have a technical problem that we have to fix, or there's something that we never thought of, like a visual effect that's coming out of the editing room, which occurs a lot. Like our showrunner would say, hey, wouldn't it be great to put the Eiffel Tower back there? And then, we never saw that coming before. And then now we have to build that visual effect, and we only have X amount of days to do that. It's stuff like that I really look at my post team down in the trenches, who have significantly more challenges at times than I do.
So let's transition. We were talking about your first job. So how did you land that first job of yours?
That's funny, because how did I land that first job? My roommate's father was an executive producer for MGM at the time, and I did a college project with his dad, and his dad said, one day, kid, you're going to work with me. And he executive produced a show called George Washington, The Forging of a Nation. The original was George Washington, I believe a 10 or 12-hour miniseries for CBS. When he did the presidential years, we got a 4-hour pickup from GM. I think GM was the sponsor. And he hired me to be the production assistant back in Philadelphia for that. So that's how I got
So how did you roll that into now a career? I mean, how do you go from a production assistant to executive?
So then immediately you think your first job that you're going to be working in the business. And so I flew back out to Los Angeles, got an interview at MGM, and I actually met with Mel Brooks, and I met with Michael Landon at the time, and neither one of them really had a lot of time to spend with me, and I kind of serendipitously walked into Mel's office and struck up a conversation with him, but didn't get the job. Yeah. And I said, Mr. Brooks, here's my resume, and he looked at it, and they were 90% all college projects.
Right.
And then he goes, oh, George Washington, great show. And then he looked at my, Pandora's Box, great show. I'm going, wait a second, he doesn't know Pandora's Box. But, he's being nice to me because we were in front of a number of people. And he said, Wesley, I tell you what, we'll call you if we need you. And I said, you'll call me? He said, we'll call you if we need you. And I said, oh, okay, thinking he was going to call me. And then he said, Wesley, the door. And I said, excuse me? He said, the door. And I realized he was offering me, was asking me to leave. And I thought, oh, okay. How many people have an opportunity to meet with Mel Brooks? So I immediately left his office with a big chuckle from the rest of his office, took a left, and then took another left into Michael Landon's office. He was doing Highway to Heaven at the time. And I walked into Michael's office. Michael was there. Mr. Landon, Wes Irwin, here's my resume. And Michael was quite honest with me. He looked at my resume, and I said, I'm here to be your at the time, a production assistant. And he said, well, honestly, we're on hiatus. I said, oh, what's hiatus? He goes, oh, we're taking a break. It's kind of like a little vacation. I go, okay. Well, when you're back in production, I'd like to be your production assistant. And he looked at my resume. He goes, well, it says here you live in San Diego. And I said, I sure do. He goes, well, you have to live up in LA to be, to get a job up here. I go, well, I can't get a job up here until I can't move up here until I get a job. And he said, well, that's the hard part. He goes, we can't hire you till you get up here. So fortunately, I found out the hardest job is not your first job. It's the second job because it's your reputation that's going to get you work. And about 6 months later, I got a call from my old unit production manager who said, hey, we're doing a show up here. And we'd like you, if you're interested, if you want to move up here, we'd like you to be our production assistant. And it was a TV show called 30-something at the time. And it was a pilot. And I said, sure, I'll come up. And I worked on that. And then I rolled over to another show, another pilot. And then people who had worked with me on George Washington started calling me and saying, hey, we hear you're working in LA. Can you work on this show here? And then eventually I got a few shows under my belt. And then when 30-something got picked up, they asked me to come back. So it was...
You came back as a production assistant?
As a production assistant. And then I did leave the show I think it was the last episode, to work as a grip at the 20th Century Fox lot because it paid a lot more money at the time. And, I was looking to move up somehow. And at that time in 1988, when I was working as a grip, which was one of the hardest physical jobs I ever did. And I'm telling you, I'm glad I did it, but I wouldn't recommend a person at my stature to do that again. But what happened was the writer's strike happened in '88. So then I had to go back to San Diego, thinking my movie career, TV career was over. And shortly after that, when the writer's strike was over, I got a call from the 30-something people, and they said, hey, we want you to come back. And I said, I can't come back as a production assistant. And they said, we don't want you to come back as a production assistant. We'd like you to come back and work in the writer's room and also learn post-production. And I said, wow, okay. And then they said, on top of that, we're going to give you a raise. And to make this even a sweeter deal, we'd like to invite you to the Emmy Awards because we're nominated for Best New Series. And all that together, I said, okay, I'm coming back. And then from there, I learned post-production, and the rest is, I guess, is my story.
Wow, okay. That's what you've kind of illustrated is like it is networking. I mean, it is the people that know you, your reputation, that gets you your jobs.
It's timing and opportunity, but it's also enthusiasm. And everybody says they could work. They're going to work hard. They're going to put the hours in. And then when it comes to, hey, Dodger game on at 4, hey, I got to go, or it's like, can I get off now because Dodger game's going on? Or, or something that people, sometimes they lose sight as what their ultimate goal is. And I think being out of the business from the time I was on George Washington to the time I got my job on 30-something, I realized I'm out of the candy store. I'm looking back into the candy store, right? And I wanted to be back in the candy store looking out, and I prayed. I go, God, if you ever get me back in this business, I'm going to dedicate myself to just, my whole life is pretty much going to be doing things about learning about the business because I realized I knew so little about the business on my first job, and I had so much more to learn that anything was, that this was not going to be a difficult task and something I, so enjoyed learning,
Okay, so now let's talk about to a person that's interested in getting into this world. I mean, there's a lot of people that are out there that want to be directors, that want to be cinematographers, but if somebody wants to get in on more of the management side as far as executives, what would be a pathway to go, or what would you advise them to do?
Come out of college, with good grades, obviously. But that's
Well, let's
that's
back it up real quick. So yeah, college. Film school, is film school something that a studio would look at for if you're looking for like executive? Is it film school, or would you rather be more like a business major? Or
I don't think that really matters. I think just having a solid education nowadays. But from a management point of view, from an executive point of view, we typically find directors or executives that have been in the field, in the production field. Post-production field. So they're post-producers, and they're very good post-producers. So you start from, I would say, post-associate or post-PA, then you go to a post-coordinator, from a coordinator to a post-supervisor to a post-producer, associate producer, co-producer. That's the titles that they're given. Once you find out if you have a liking to the technical side of post-production. And if you have that, then you open yourself up to a world of possibilities, because once you could go into direct, and we know many post-producers who have gone on to direct, as we have editors who have gone on to directing producers, the executive producer who's the guy directing. That's where you see a lot of post-producers move into.
is there anything that advice you would give to somebody that's just coming up that wants to work in the as a post executive? What any kind of words you can give them?
You have to put in the hours. You have to have the enthusiasm. You have to have your own inner drive. You have to not have an ego, because in this business there's plenty of egos out there, and you don't need to compete, especially as you're moving up. As you move up the ladder, you don't want your ego interfering with the success of your career. Given that, take in as much information as you possibly can, because this business changes, as you guys have all seen. In the last 5 years alone, we went from shooting HD to 2K to 4K, and there's talk of 6 and 8K right now. What we used to have a 4x3 television set moved into a 16:9 TV set that was, if you were lucky, a 32-inch TV set, which was big in the day. Now you've got an 80-inch TV set, which is going to be standard. Now you used to rush home to watch television, and now you don't need to rush home because it's on demand. All the images that with the exception of maybe a baseball game or an actual sporting event. Technology changes so rapidly that you now have to stay on top of the curve, and you can't not continually educate yourself in technology. And for a post-executive, you have to know how we did it the old way, and you have to see what's coming in the future. And if you can stay ahead of that curve, that to me is where you're going to be the most successful executive. And you have to always keep in mind the money aspect, because it's so easy as a technical person to kind of shy away from the money aspect, but it's a business. It's all about the money. And there's a number of entities that are trying to produce shows nowadays, and they're all doing it on some sort of budget. It's all about making sure that you maintain your budget at the end of the day, and that this is a business. And a business that in order to stay in business, you have to make a profit.
My thanks to Wes Irwin for sharing his time with us in this look at what a post-production executive does. If you like this exploration, hit us with a thumbs up, subscribe, and consider patronizing us on Patreon. Special thanks to our A-Team sponsors. Get your name on that list. But anything you can give, every little bit helps us bring you more content. Thank you for watching, and go out there and make something great. I'm John Hess. I'll see you at FilmmakerIQ.com.